everybody. It is I, Nick Pennsylvania, here as I always am with my good friend Brendan Bond. Brendan, how are you?
I'm doing excellent, Nick. How are you doing, bud?
I'm happy to hear you're doing excellent. I finally took the AC units out of my windows this evening, so
Ooh,
if you hear barking dogs, if you hear a siren, forgive me, I didn't get to the mute button quick enough, or I was in the middle of a thought and it all happened in the background. The windows are open. It's glorious.
it is.
The lows for the nights are dropping into the 40s, and we really are open window people until it gets below freezing, and even then, just until like it starts to threaten the plaster work on the house.
Right.
So really in our element over here. It has been an unseasonably warm late
Mm-hmm.
summer, early autumn thus far, so really happy. But happy too that you're doing well. I know this is episode 97. We're hoping to do something little special for episode 100, which is nigh
Yeah.
upon us. And of course, we have a couple really big things with some newfound friends of ours from afar
Mm-hmm.
that I won't say anything more about because it'll be here before we know it, and we have to prepare. We have to be professional over here. So
Yeah. Yeah. And along with that, we're gonna have just as a bit of a teaser, we're gonna have a special episode for you guys coming out sometime next week. So if you
yeah,
see
about the
something come,
true meaning of Flag Day.
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, we have a lot of fun things on the horizon right now as we're into spooky season officially now.
And one of the spookiest things to me is EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. I know I've told the story about living alone during
Hmm.
the Christmas break in an apartment we had shared. The biggest thing everybody knows about the apartment was we were like the first people to live in this
Hmm.
building, and a person had died in it. The man who came to repair the water heater had died in it the day you guys moved in. I didn't move in just yet. But I lived there during the break all by myself, and I was kind of spooked out by that because it's a big empty place and it's new, which you would think would make it less threatening, but it was kind of creaking. Everything was settling in. And so as soon as I get done with work at the auto garage I was at, I would come home, I would shower, I would make something quick to eat, and I would essentially lock myself in the room. And I
Yeah,
would turn on my portable TV or I would turn a radio on. That way I could, if anything made a noise, I would say, oh, it's just the TV, just the radio. But the
right.
radio was always on coast to coast AM all night.
Didn't
And
help
I
anything.
just, oh no. And I
Yeah.
distinctly remember there was a couple EVP sessions that I woke up during and I was like, no. And I was like,
Yep.
I love this show, but I cannot deal with this right now. So EVPs are about this, but even when I can explain them,
Hmm.
I go, I don't like that. We both work in recording and
Hmm.
music and everything, and I know you remember the old 4-track days that we grew up on, and even hearing deteriorated tape sound
Hmm.
decay is really spooky to me. So you have some EVPs that a friend of ours who shared some EVPs they picked up before is bringing to us, but they don't come from them. I'm going to give it over to you. I've spoken
Yeah.
enough.
So we wanted to share this with everybody because, like you mentioned, boy, are EVPs spooky, and we're going to be talking about a bunch of elements with EVPs tonight, I think. But these ones in particular, these ones came to us from a friend and listeners. They received them from one of their family members, who we would not maybe classify as like someone who was like into the paranormal, someone who's not into spooky stuff like a lot of us are. They came across these recordings, and this is as much as a setup as I'll give folks because they didn't want uh, they wanted to remain anonymous, which is completely understandable. But they came across these files when they were going through and deleting old like field recordings, and this person was recording at a local park. This is at Brady's Run Park, which is over in Beaver County, just a few miles to the west of us here. And we'll talk a little bit about that park, but want to give everyone kind of the setting. And they were going through deleting these recordings. They would typically, as a lot of folks did during lockdown, they would go out places and just try and be in nature by themselves, try and enjoy. the sights and sounds. So they would do bird recordings, which again is something that I can really relate to, as they were doing a recording of this Carolina wren, which are awesome little birds. They were going through listening to that, and they heard something on the recording, and they were like, "What in the world is this?" So they then shared it with their family members who are our friends, and they immediately were like, "That's an EVP." And set them over to us. So that's kind of the provenance of these recordings.
Yeah,
Um,
and I really just want to express, or rather stress, that these people were not looking for this. They weren't trying. It's not like they were
yeah,
ghost hunting out in the woods
right.
or something. And it wasn't until sometime later that they even realized that they had caught
Yeah.
anything. So I have not heard these yet. Do they don't, I'm assuming based on the story you told that they don't react to what
No.
is heard in real time.
hmm And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play. There's two recordings. And again, these were chopped by someone who's not an audio engineer like we are. So I wish I had the full recordings, but I just don't. This is what was kind of passed along to us.
Hey, my time to. 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 Judges. 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 Judges.
Well, gosh, you had started by saying that it didn't sound English to you. And well, I agree with that. It's what does it sound like? Well, it doesn't sound like anything I'm particularly familiar with.
hmm
I have I took some years of Latin and Spanish, and
Yeah.
I can speak passable German and a
hmm
wee bit of French that I maintained from being a kid. I I don't recognize anything there. Now, this is all again saying that this is a human voice we're hearing. And if
hmm
it's a human voice, what is the language? And of course, the fantastic side of me wants to go like, well, is this a native voice? Is this a
hmm
like an Iroquois a tongue or something that we're hearing?
hmm
But that's the fantastical part of me, which is
Yeah.
already jumping to the conclusion that, oh, what we're
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah.
So what could it be? Could it be interference from there's an EMS station not far down
hmm
the road from where this was. Could it be interference with some other electrical thing?
Yeah, the weird thing about it, and I'm gonna now play for everyone an isolated and not like enhanced, but I'm gonna just do a baseline vocal EQ over it to remove a little bit of the noise, and I'm gonna play that right here.
Hey, my time to. Hey, my time to. Hey, my time to. Judges. Judges. Judges.
So what I think the interesting thing about these EVPs when I first heard them is you hear the sound of like the bird, the Carolina wren. You hear, I think, what sounds like maybe brakes or something in the distance, like truck brakes. You hear a lot of space. It sounds like you can definitely tell this person is outside. The voice that you hear, in my opinion, sounds like it is very close to the microphone. Um,
Yeah.
and and again, this is someone who says they were making these recordings by themselves, and would have known if someone was talking into the microphone, kind of thing. Um, that begs the question: is like you said, from an interference standpoint, is that a disembodied voice? Probably not, because they would have heard it if it happened, if it would have been something that was auditory while they were standing there.
Right. They don't react to it at all. And I
hmm
mean, on all these ghost shows and everything, and that's again what I wanted to stress. Like, this is not somebody that was actively seeking this, but on those ghost
Right.
shows and everything, frequently, it
hmm
seems like a 50-50 split. They'll say one person will say they think they heard something, another, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
or nothing. There's nothing like that. It's just, and again, this person does not want to be known,
Mm-hmm.
so we're trying to keep things anonymous. But I gotta know. Do you know how they reacted upon hearing it?
They were confused enough that they reached out to their family to be like, "What is this?" That's as much as I know about it. It was
And
enough that
again,
it freaked them out, you know.
sure, it freaked me out a little bit
Yeah.
because again, like the fantastic again, I keep saying this. We're already drawing a conclusion that this is a war,
Yeah.
but it's hard not to hear it any other way, and that's part of it is us like pattern seeking. But
Yeah.
it sounds guttural. It sounds like a man,
Mm-hmm.
and it
It
doesn't
does.
sound nice.
It doesn't sound nice. No, it doesn't. It sounds kind of aggressive. Um, and you know, I can imagine because again, when I first heard these, when my friend sent them over, like I stopped what I was doing and I was just like, nope, I don't like this at all. This does not sound fun.
Yeah. What else did
Whatever
you
is going on.
think?
Well, the thing that I originally thought, and it wasn't until I got it into my computer, can really listen with like headphones and everything. I originally thought that it sounded like it was almost like overlaid, like the sound, like the vocal sound didn't like match the ambient audio.
Yeah, almost
Um,
like when you try to superimpose yourself
Pose
in an
something,
old photo, it's hard to
right?
get the right.
Yeah, yeah, and that happens with audio too. Whenever you kind of blow up the wave file and everything here when you're looking at it, it looks like it's vocal. A lot of times, again, like these shows and everything, like we always talk about, um, you know, people are like, oh, this is beyond the human range of, you know, what humans can like produce and everything. It's perfectly within what humans can produce. This is not anomalous in that sense. But as someone who spends an ungodly amount of time looking at voices in waveform on a screen, I can tell you this looks like a voice. You know, where it's coming from, who knows? So, but because of how the ambient sound of the voice is interacting, that does, I think, put it in the classification of either it is interference coming from like a radio station or something, which if that's what it was, it tends to phase in and out from a waveform standpoint, where it is, you don't realize how choppy it is until you really, really zoom in on it.
Well, I can
Um,
imagine it's almost like when you're like on the shortwave, you're trying to a station will kind of float in
yeah,
between in and
yeah,
out a little bit.
yes.
So you would
Well,
expect to see like a tail.
you expect to see a tail, and you'd expect to see like a modulation in the waveform. You don't see that here, which is consistent with just a voice. Now, again, not saying it couldn't be interference. I'm certainly not saying that, but it's what I'm saying is it's not consistent with interference that we see. Because, like you mentioned, Nick, we there was a place where we used to practice and record that was up a few counties north of us. That was an old one-room schoolhouse that, by all accounts, was very haunted. Not anything bad, just you just hear stuff all the time.
Yeah, and I
And
was only up there a couple of times, but the stories preceded it.
it was, yeah, and like the one of the main audio engineers at that place, who was like a real successful computer engineer and now business owner, real straightforward gentleman, would get recordings on these on our board all the time, and he became very good at picking them out between, okay, is this interference because we have 500 yards of cables in this room,
And
or is
probably at
that
least two generations of
right?
electric.
Right. Or is this a voice that is coming from the room? You know, and he would very pragmatically be like, "Who do you think this is?" And just like play like this, and kind of like this. Every time he caught a voice, and me and Tom, me and Matt, we would catch him sometimes. You could never tell what they were saying. It wasn't like it was someone saying something spooky. It just sounded like someone like just talking, but it wasn't like intelligible. You know,
So
um,
it's almost like something was caught that it wasn't intended.
that's what it seems like. Yeah.
You know,
Um,
it's almost like when we talk about like the tape, not just the
yeah.
stone tape thing, but just like
Hmm.
the image that's
The
this thing
residual.
that
Yeah. Hmm.
exactly. Because there's some statements about where they're being deliberate. So many of the EVPs that we
Hmm.
hear on the radio or on these TV shows are responding
Right.
intelligently. That's not what
That
this
doesn't seem to,
is.
yeah. And just from my own experience with EVPs, in my own life, and I've heard other. Actually, the person who sent this to us sent us an EVP that they caught once in Gettysburg from from like a session they were doing.
Yeah, that was
But
really
in
early on in our
Yeah,
episodes too.
but like I said, in my experience, it's always been like it's always seemed like you're catching something and it's not intelligent. It's not intelligible like speech, but it sounds like speech. So it could be a lot of things in that sense. But like in my own personal opinion, this does seem like speech and it doesn't seem consistent with interference, which if it's not a disembodied voice or a just actual person, then it's kind of a textbook EVP in that sense. It's literal electronic voice phenomenon.
Yeah, I just don't know. It's definitely again we're we're jumping a
We're
lot.
really, yeah.
We
Yeah.
really are because
Yeah.
I trust you because I
Hmm.
know you know enough about you're an audio
Hmm.
engineer by trade and by training.
Hmm.
I trust you when you say it, and you've got, experience with radio as well. It's just it is a very weird sounding thing. And what other things like okay, let me ask you this from a
Hmm.
professional opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's things that can make sound that we might not hear.
Hmm.
Like I can hardly hear the trains coming anymore
Right.
or the church bells at noon and 6 because I'm just so accustomed to them. Is there something that this could be that maybe didn't register or a sort of sound that could be close but not recognized until a recording is made? You know
So,
what I mean? Like could a train horn.
mhm.
I'm trying to get to something that's like, oh, this is
Yeah.
not a ghost.
Yeah. So whenever I pull it up and put it through an actual like equalization analyzer, so it's looking at the spectrum of sound and saying, here is the level at 100 hertz, here's the level at 400, 1,000. Whenever you look at both of them, the majority of what you're seeing is between 100 and 500, which is kind of low from a voice standpoint. Most of our vocal range is taking place between like 1,000 and 2,000, but that's where like the sibilance is at. This is again, like you mentioned, much more guttural, and the fact that it's effectively 2 octaves below from an equalization standpoint is a little weird, but I'm not seeing any weird spikes in like the real low range, like below 100, which is kind of like when you can feel a train coming but not hear it.
Yeah.
That's where those wavelengths are taking place. Stuff that's real low amplitude like that, those waves are very, very long, and as a result travel a very long distance and can kind of like they can just be heard from a long way off as compared to stuff that's much higher in register. With this, you don't see a weird low end spike, nor do you see a weird high end spike, which sometimes can cause, especially with like crappy speakers and crappy microphones, if you have a lot of high end sound, what can basically happen is what's called like a harmonic resonance, where if you have this huge spike of 20,000 hertz, it can create in that microphone, in that diaphragm, it can create artifacts at octaves below it that are in the human range. But when those happen, they're very pronounced. And we don't see that here.
Well, this brings up another thing. When you speak of artifacts, and I spoke about
Hmm.
tape, and when you reuse tape, like a
Right.
rewritable tape
Hmm.
or VHS, you'll get artifacts because you can never, just like when you're using pencil and paper, you can never fully erase clean. Or
Right.
even like a chalkboard would be a good analogy. Until you get
Yeah.
the soap and
Yeah.
water out, it's never fully clean. There's always artifacts.
Yes.
So,
It's a good analogy.
do
Yeah.
we know what this person was using to record on? Because I'd imagine that could.
So yeah, it was just their iPhone at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, it's because one of the things I asked about that they weren't able to get is if we would have had the original files before this person clipped them, we may have had metadata that would have told us what application they were using, geolocation, all that kind of stuff.
Well, it
Um,
might have actually been enough to see if there, because again, what we hear is really
mhm.
short. If we're talking about radio interference,
You
could
would
those like tails be on the other side of those
others
clips?
record exactly, and this is where it's yeah. No, I think that's an excellent point. That's why I wish we had like the full recordings because we would have that
Sure.
context. We'd have more context to kind of judge this in. Because if you don't hear anything for a while, then you hear these noises and then nothing for a while, especially if the person was standing still like it sounds like they are, then that's different than if they're walking and they hit a random spot of interference, or if they were recording on some other type of device that wasn't a modern cell phone. If someone was walking around with a ADAT recorder, doing field
Listen,
recordings or something,
yeah,
uh,
I'm
that's
just
just
trying to
different.
do it
Yeah.
the old way here.
Right, right. No, you know what? If I saw someone with an ADAT recorder trying to catch bird noises
They
in the
got the old
park,
silver tone reel
right,
out in the
I would,
suitcase.
yeah, I'd be so jazzed. I'd be like, listen, whatever you're up to, bud, like, let's talk. We probably need to be friends.
Then you
But
find out, though, you are already,
right, yeah, that's usually how it works. No, but yeah, but I think these recordings are really interesting. And so one of the things I did after like kind of deep diving, like I said, into the files themselves was to look up if there was any associated hauntings in the area. And again, this was recorded in the greater Brady's Run Park area, which is a pretty big park in Beaver County. It's not small. So it is a wide area and it does get pretty heavily used. Um
Yeah, I of course regaled you before with my story of the unusually large fly I saw as a child, which I've recanted here at least
yeah,
twice
yeah.
in these episodes. But that was right in Brady's Run Park. In fact, it
Hmm.
was right behind the ice rink back when that ice rink only had one ice surface. I knew it well
Yeah.
when my family first moved north and then to Western Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
That's where I played hockey. That was home ice.
That was your home ice. Yeah.
Yeah, Brady's Run Park
Uh
ran the scoreboard there for the beer leagues when I was merely 9 years old. Good times.
Sounds about right. That checks out.
Those dudes
Um,
did not mince words if you failed to hit stop on the
oh, I
clock.
bet.
Oh my God. They didn't care that you were nine, but they were good dudes.
I'm sure. Yeah, usually one and the same. But yeah, so it's not an inconsequentially small park or anything. But whenever I did some research, I really couldn't find any historical like hauntings that were specific to that park, which was honestly kind of surprising given how many stories come out of the greater Beaver area.
Well, and
Um,
also, like you say, it's a big park. It's pretty well established. I mean, it's been there, I think, since the 30s.
yeah, it's old.
And a
Yeah.
lot of people come in and out of it. I
Yeah.
know banquets that are held there.
I've been
It's
to
just a
wedding.
lot
I've been
happening.
to weddings there. There's an equestrian
Right.
center that I've done photos at. Yeah, it's
Well, that place where this woman was, I know horses are often trotting down,
hmm.
or at least they were back in the early 90s.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a cool park. It's a really nice creek. A lot of good wildlife. Great park. But yeah, but surprisingly, it is lacking of like haunted tales. The only thing I did find was there was actually a missing girl, a girl that went missing back in 1977. This little girl, and her body was found in Brady's Run Park, which is really sad. But like,
Yeah, and we don't get into true crime very often, but I don't know if I ever heard that story, and you would think I would because again, when we moved out
hmm,
there and spent all that time there, that wasn't
not
all
long
that
after.
long ago. Yeah.
Right.
I
Yeah.
gotta know, was it ever resolved? Like what had happened to this young
No.
girl?
Yeah, no, they never
Ugh.
caught they never caught the killer, which is even worse. So really like when I was looking up like strange things in the park, that was the vast majority of what I found was things referencing that cold case, which again is very sad. but like we mentioned though, it is like a spooky area in the sense that there are lots and lots of tales that come out of that part of Beaver County. So it was almost surprising that there wasn't it, because I was expecting to find a few stories, just because the park has been around for so long and has been used so often. I don't think we could tie this to any existing hauntings,
Well,
unfortunately.
I kind of like that though,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
again, if if this was a place that was predisposed to a certain story,
Hmm.
we I even our best intentions,
Right.
I feel like we would be tripping over ourselves to say, well, it must be that. And
Right,
if
exactly.
maybe I would like to think we'd be more reserved than that, but
Hmm.
probably not.
Probably not. That's wishful
And
thinking.
certainly other
Yeah.
people would be subscribing to
Right.
that story,
Hmm.
this audio.
Hmm. And yeah, and I think that this also kind of, the fact that it is like a mundane EVP in that sense. It's not like some spooky voice, whispering this person's name or something like that.
Right.
This kind of does fit in with how we talk about a lot whenever there is paranormal activity. It should stand to reason that the vast majority of it goes A, unnoticed, and B, is exceptionally mundane.
Well, I'm going to look something up real quick. If
Hmm.
we can just kind of pause for a moment. Okay, Brendan, I'm going to send you something real quick.
Okay.
Just take a listen to it, and then we'll talk a little bit after this. Okay, so we're back. We had to take a moment. We were talking about native languages, and of course, one of the predominant tribes in the area was like the Seneca branch of the Iroquois Confederacy. That's how I understand how they operated. But and just listening to some of those sounds by somebody as a speaker, here's the problems with that. There wasn't so much has been lost for some
Hmm.
obvious reasons that I'm sure, just like if you were to hear English spoken 300 years ago, it'd be a bit distinct from what we speak today.
Hmm.
I'm imagining the same is true here. However, we were listening to just some of the basic sounds. I'm trying to stay away from saying like, this is what we're hearing, but
Yeah.
there are some of those sounds there.
No, some of like the guttural G's and everything. It sounds similar. But again, like what I'm hearing is relatively unintelligible in the
Yeah.
EVPs.
And are we
And
trying to, again, are we
right,
falling into the trap I just said that hopefully we wouldn't?
right. I think probably. Um,
Yeah,
you
I'll
could
stop
yeah,
that.
we could probably pull up something that has similar sounds from the other side of the world, and be like, oh yeah, yeah, I could hear that. Yeah.
A hundred
Um,
percent. Because like you said, it's too short. We don't have all the context.
yeah,
If we could get what we could say, like, oh, that's undeniably a full, complete thought
or
being
something.
stated, then we could
Yeah.
try to find somebody that
Right.
recognizes that.
Yeah. Well, I do have like I mentioned, I do have a friend, a very good friend and listener who has some advanced degrees in something adjacent to this.
So they
So
could correct me with everything I said about the Iroquois
probably
Confederacy.
they're probably going to reach out.
Yeah, I hope they do.
Yeah, they're not shy about correcting us, which we love, because we get stuff wrong all the time. So
All the time.
all the time, not from lack of trying, but just from lack of
If you
knowledge.
don't screw up, you're not trying
Yeah,
hard
right,
enough.
right. But so yeah, we're gonna keep researching this because it's not often someone sends us like a good EVP like this. So we want to do our due diligence as it
Yeah,
is.
so many EVPs I am underwhelmed by. And like I
For
said, even
sure.
when I can explain it, it's oftentimes still really spooky. I know
For sure.
a friend of
Yeah.
ours was on here some time ago and shared some EVPs with us.
Hmm.
I didn't hear anything. Like I heard like a weird noise, but I
Yeah.
didn't think it was saying anything. And you and him
I
were
was,
saying
yeah.
it.
I
Yeah,
was I was very convinced with two EVPs that we've had previously on what I was hearing. Now, granted, both those times it didn't exactly match up with what the person who got the EVPs thought they were hearing. So yeah, I mean that's kind of I guess the audio pareidolia that can happen. But yeah, just the vibes on this one are completely different. It's just like
that's the
that's what
thing.
I don't that's what weirded me out. Not what they were saying, but just the fact that It was,
Well,
yeah, it was
and
just
knowing
very
they were by
strange.
themselves in the woods, not looking for anything, not
Right.
stirring up trouble.
Yeah, they weren't out yeah trying to stir up some ghosts or anything. And that
Ill
that does that
vibes.
does that that does it's that's part of the context. Um
Right.
so we're still, like I said, we're still gonna do some work on this, but if anyone out there has any idea what we just heard, let us know. We would really like your guys' input out there, because maybe someone does hear something that we're not hearing. That'd be super cool. We just like to talk about it either way. Or if you have an EVP that you think would scare us, send it over. Uh, that's something we're
Please?
always, yeah, please, yeah. Um, that's something we're always interested in, because it is funny. There are times where you hear EVPs and you're just like, man, if that was recorded exactly how it is reported to be recorded, like, what the heck could that possibly be? It's just
Mm-hmm.
like one I always go back to. A lot of our listeners may be familiar with the podcast out there, Astonishing Legends. Every time I think about EVPs, I think about that show, because the two hosts, they're fantastic. They've been doing it for years. They're gold standard with a lot of investigative podcasting and paranormal. Um, but the one of the hosts was very much like the skeptical believer, and the other one was like, or the hopeful skeptic, and the other one was like the believer. The hopeful skeptic caught a EVP in the notoriously haunted Sally house out, I believe, in Indiana. And when they played it on their podcast, it really shook me up for a few days. And
I have
the
not heard this,
oh,
but I
I'll
will
I'll
be
I'll,
soon
I'll
enough.
send it over to you. And it
I think
basically
it's
turned.
something I'm going to listen to in the morning.
Yeah, don't let's do it tonight. Yeah. But it's something that the host, who had been doing this for years, afterwards was like, had a very different take on the paranormal after capturing it.
Really?
Yeah, they were just like, welp, that's like, and this is someone who's doing it for a career,
Right.
like that is the guy's day job. So what I say that to say, that for how many EVPs are out there that everyone's like, not sure if I hear anything. There are a few you get where you're just like, man, whatever's going on, no bueno, don't like it. And this falls into that category for me. I'm not sure what's being said. I don't like it.
Yeah, I agree. Now I'm going to go watch something funny so I don't go to bed in a little while thinking about that. So good
Yeah.
night, everybody.
Good, everyone. Yeah. But yeah, so if you have questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, feelings, EVPs, story, or if you have something you want to share yourself, please reach out. We've been getting a lot of feedback lately, especially via email. We love hearing from everybody. So keep that coming. And again, keep an eye and ear out for some special recordings that are going to be coming out soon, that we're going to be sharing with everybody. You can follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, or you can just send us an email at theghost podcast@gmail.com.